right from the first shot that we did, which was, again, a film about a refugee family in India, all the way through to Writing with Fire, our politics has essentially been, how do we get these stories out to larger audiences, and how do we define impact? And very early on, with Writing with Fire, we knew that these are women that audiences, not just in India, but globally, would essentially relate to. They are champions, they are underdogs. This is a classic David versus Goliath story, so to speak. And so we crafted an impact strategy, and essentially over the years, through the course of the production of the film itself, we've been able to raise some amount of resources for them, create partnerships, and after the premiere of the film, I mean, it's led to new opportunities for them, and for the first time in the nearly 19 years that Khabar Lahariya has existed as a news institution, they have partnered with an international organization and co-hosted a digital event. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you so much. Without you, we wouldn't have got them as partners today.
So they're being extremely ambitious. We are being ambitious about what this film could do to them, but you know, we're taking it one step at a time and also being realistic about things.
But I mean, the news we get here in Germany or in Europe about India, and in particular about women's rights in India, it's very devastating, I would say, and also about freedom of press and how journalists are put under pressure. So, I mean, they have the combination of, and we see it in the film partly, but how are they doing in this environment of like female unfriendly, like toxic environment, and also not just toxic against women, but also toxic against the female freedom of press? How is that relationship going for them these days?
Well, that's an interesting question.
These are extremely difficult times. I think being a journalist anywhere in the world at the moment is very hard. But the way I see it is, it's always been hard for Dalit women. They've been kept out of, structurally kept out of systems from every power structure that exists in society and is created by humankind is designed in a way to keep them out. It's been cruel, and the Dalit woman's body has been always a site of conflict and violence. And so in that way, it's not new. That battle of gender and politics coalescing is not new. It's become a lot more intense now. So they're equipped with the skill set, what it takes to negotiate, what it takes to make noise, and when to step away, you know, after folding your cards. That strategy is planned out very wisely by Khabar Lahariya. And I think that is what is kept them consistently growing. And that intelligence is very important. They've not let go of their feminist lens. They've not let go of their independence in this highly competitive, highly aggressive, mostly male-dominated news landscape within the country. And that choice to continue to remain independent comes with its own risks and difficult decisions. But I think who they are has contributed greatly in how they are functioning in these tough times.
I mean, through you two, I got in contact with them, and as you mentioned just before, we had, for all of the audience who don't know that, we just had a workshop on storytelling, a conference day on storytelling for the common good today. And we practically partnered up with them, having half of the conference in Berlin today, half of the conference in New Delhi. And it was amazing to have them on the panels, even if it was virtually. It was a beautiful experience, and I was very impressed with them. And in the preparation of this conference day, I was talking to them a lot, and they are even expanding They are setting up a curriculum. They are even setting up online workshops. They are handing out mobiles to women. So how we see it partly in the film, but how does that impact society in the areas where they move in and kind of empower women? Is there like a change of thought in the society? Does that like, what's the impact of that?
I mean, you know, just for context, like for a Dalit woman living in Uttar Pradesh to walk out of a home and work as a journalist is nothing short of a revolution in itself. Women over there have not had access to systems of education or empowerment that, you know, people in other parts of the country would have had. And the fact, and you see in the film how Shamkali, who is so ginger about technology and doesn't want to touch a mobile phone, eventually goes on to crack a case. And the fact is that when more women see women like Meera and Sunita and Shamkali step out of their homes and do the kind of work they do, there is, I mean, it's impact that is intangible. You cannot quantify it. It's really qualitative. But the fact is that, say, someone like Sunita gets married but comes back, swivels back into Khabar Lahariya, and now she's actually the one who's leading these digital literacy workshops for all the women. She's actually the lead trainer right now. So it's unimaginably beautiful to see what they've been able to create in such a small space of time. Their growth has been explosive. I mean, when I saw, you know, these were credits that were locked in just before Sundance, January of this year, 151 million views on their YouTube channel. And I was like, maybe I might just get asked a question right now about their viewership. And they've crossed 167 million right now. Wow. And it's all organic growth. I mean, they don't have money to sort of put in marketing budgets. So there is clearly an audience for their kind of work. And this audience, and because we're living in digital times on YouTube and Facebook, you can actually check your demographics. And this audience is not just women, it's also men. And it's a great testimony to the impact of the power and the quality of their journalism. And it's been profound. So I think maybe many years or some decades down the line, the Khabar Lahariya model might be studied in India as a very viable model of independent journalism. And I believe that's the impact of their work.
I think it's not just a model for India. I think it's a model just as it is also for everywhere because it's so empowering. I would like to open the mic to the floor because it's the first panel with an audience. So there's a microphone. Please feel free and feel very invited to ask questions to those amazing two people because that's a one time in a life chance right now. If you don't have questions, I do have many. Is there someone moving? Yeah, please just go up to the microphone. We do need the sound. Hi there.
Sorry, I thought the microphone was coming to me. So
sorry for that. It's Corona, so.
Okay, I was just wondering how they're funding themselves because I mean, you see, they have a lot of equipment. They seem to be quite, established with buildings, and I wondered how are they funding themselves. The other question I had was whether they ever have been threatened personally. As you said, it is a revolution to get out there as a Dalit woman. And some of the scenes look quite scary when the man was saying, get out of my way. So I was wondering, do they have any situations where they get personally threatened? Has there ever been a situation where they considered closing their operations down because of that threat? And then, sorry, the third question, I was wondering, what is their key to success? You've just mentioned viewership, and you've said you've analyzed it's not just women. Men are also watching it, but considering their status in society, it's a bit surprising that they even get that many views. So I would love to hear your take on it. What is their key to success?
Three very important questions. Thank you so much. Who wants to start on which question?
The first question was...
How did they get funded?
Their funding essentially so far has been philanthropic. They are known within the liberal Indian circles as an independent institution, and they have been able to raise funding through philanthropic organizations so far. But I think what was key in the 2016 meeting that we filmed was that they wanted to move away from philanthropy and become an independent news outlet that has a subscriber base, that has viewers who are paying for their news. And so to a large extent, they've been able to shift over there. But I also think that with the advent of digital, it's also led to new collaborations and partnerships across the country. And now, because more people know about their work online, it's led to greater recognition. And Uttar Pradesh, also just for context, is a very politically significant part of India. And there are very few newsrooms that are operating across that state. And Khabar Lahariya has its roots deep in even media dark towns and villages of the country. So they're a much sought after institution in India. So now they're getting to do a lot of commission work. They are getting into international collaborations. The education curriculum that they have designed is going to be a model that is going to be a for-profit model for them. So they have found new and innovative ways of raising funds for themselves.
I think the second part of the question was the security question.
The danger. It is extremely risky to be doing the work that they are. While filming, we ourselves found ourselves in spaces which were not very friendly. You're in illegal mines, you're in police stations. But there's this constant negotiation that you have to do with mostly men who don't want you there. And there have been incidents where Khabar Lahariya journalists have been trolled, have been stalked. And one has to understand how it works slightly differently. So if you're an urban journalist working with a network, you get trolled online. You're mostly behind a screen. You're in an AC room. Your institution protects you. With these journalists, their troll might just be living in the village that they're walking into. They know what they're eating. They know what bus they're taking. They know what's the color of the sari is that they're wearing today. So it's actually quite close. And that makes it even more dangerous. But I think their way of their strategy, and I use the word strategy because it's really thought out. They're not waiting for surprises to happen. There have been cases where their cell phones have been snatched and people have gotten violent. It's really, their model is based on their credibility. The first thing they say is, look us up on YouTube. Look at the kind of reporting we're doing. So immediately, the idea is to engage, even in the scene that you saw where this man's asking her to get out. And it grew very aggressive very quickly. And I felt really nervous being there. And that's where, and I just focused my gaze on Sunita to just see, to get cues from her. Do we bolt from here? Do we continue to stay? Do we stop filming? And she just didn't flinch. And that's when I realized this is so everyday. What is shocking and surprising and making me so nervous is because I have the privilege too. And this is a daily interaction and negotiation. And that's where really they minimize the risk by sort of negotiating, doing conversations. And the fact that they've been around for 19 years now, their peers are, of course, their colleagues and male journalists, with whom they have a good relationship. They have a good relationship with the administration. So it's taken a lot of time to do that groundwork, and that keeps them, in many ways, safe. It's not that easy to just attach a camera anymore. It can happen any day, and they're on their own, but there is a huge amount of credibility that works as a protective ring. And what is the, I think, formula for success?
The formula of success was the third question. If it's how they get that many click rates and how they reach not just women, but also like as you said, a very diverse audience. Is it their credibility?
Absolutely, and I'll build on that. And not backing down. They've done such risque reporting. No one in those parts want to talk about menstrual health or issues concerning women's health or women's anatomy, and they do these long pieces about consent in sexual relationships within a marriage, women, the rights aspect of it, creating that safe space. And they know these videos are being watched by men, and they get trolled for it. But they respond. Always there's a response from Kavita or Meera, engaging that troll and then having a conversation. And one of my favorite anecdotes is when Kavita was traveling on a bus, and she was getting constantly trolled by this one person, and this person came, sat next to her and said, "Do you know me?" And she was like, "No." He said, "I'm the person who leaves a comment every time." Oh. She was like, "Are you serious?" And then they have a conversation. And eventually, at the end of that conversation, she takes a selfie and posts it online. So that's the level of, I don't know what the word is, but just not backing down, but doing it with grace and doing it in a way that engages the person and not antagonizing. And that's a lot of hard work, especially when your work is entirely digital, but to pay attention to that kind of detail is really, I think, a secret ingredient that's hiding in the corners.
If we talk about the journalists, I don't know if you know that, but how many of these women are out there? We met a few of them, I guess, but how many of these incredibly brave journalists, because they are training constantly new ones and they are expanding. Do you know how large the network is approximately?
So when we were at Sundance, it was 30 journalists.
Okay.
But I do believe there's a new cadre of journalists now. I don't know the exact number. Do you know the exact number? But I mean, we get their newsletters, and I counted like about 15, 16 new ones who've come in. They're not formally inducted, they're trainees. But on average, I would say 30 journalists for sure.
That's a lot.
Fair number, yeah, but by Indian standards,
Yeah.
Numbers.
You know, I'm from Austria.
Yeah.
We are tiny.
8 million and 1.4
million.
Yeah.
8 million. So I'm from the third largest city. We had that the other day. 200,000. For me, 30 journalists is quite a lot. So are there any other questions from the audience? We're really happy to take them. Yeah, please, there is the microphone. It's so nice to have people asking questions, isn't it?
Real human beings.
Real human beings.
Hello.
Hello.
My question is, did you have a timeline when you started filming, and at what point did you know, like, okay, we can stop filming and we can edit now? And my second question was, how did you not watch the film but also be able to direct it?
What's the second one, sorry?
How were you able to direct the film without having watched it in full?
I think you have watched it, didn't you?
Yeah. So when we started off, we knew this was going to be a long-term project because we were following the trajectory of the newspaper. Anything that is growing would take a couple of years. So we gave ourselves a timeline of 2 years. And then at the end of that, we said, no, the story is going deeper. We need to follow this strand. And the country is also constantly changing during this time. So a lot of storylines come in, a lot of them go out, characters come in. So that constantly was happening. So for 4 years, we kept filming. And I think it was in the last 2 years that the story was coming together. And while we were editing, how did we figure that the film is...
I mean, the trick over here essentially was that after every shoot schedule, we'd come back to Delhi and we would edit scenes and we would break every day of filming. So there were 2 cameras on ground at any given point in time. So Rintu and Karan, who was the other cinematographer, would work as one film unit and I would work as another film unit, and we would follow different characters and come back in the evening and compare notes and then film again the next day. And so we'd spend anywhere between 7 to 14 days at any given point in time on ground and then come back to Delhi. And there was a huge volume of footage after every shoot schedule. And we made it a point to essentially break every day down into scenes just to make sense of what have we filmed and what are the shots and what are the stories. And that essentially helped us in the 4th year of editing when we eventually decided that we need to start editing the film. We already had this body of sort of scenes on us, and it was essentially like a jigsaw puzzle, so to speak. Like what works where, what's the timeline, how do we work with the character arcs, so to speak. So that sort of helped us to move into the edit stage. I think we would still be editing the film if we had started our edit process in the final year of filming, which was, the 4th year. We wouldn't have been able to finish the film.
But what was the point where you decided, okay, we have a storyline. After 4 years, we stop. It's hard to stop, but we stop now.
I think Rintu got bored of yeah, she got really frustrated by the 4th year because I think we were gunning to submit the film to festivals in 2019. And we had a look at the material, and we had Anne Fabini as a consulting editor on the project. And we had this profound conversation with Anne over Zoom. And Anne was like, do you think you've got the film you wanted? And I was of the opinion that we haven't, because we need to give it more time. And Rintu was like, we have it, because we need to go into the festival circuit now.
So she was right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so
Obviously.
for those of you who don't know, I mean, both of us are married. So, it was her saying the film's done and me saying it wasn't done, and it was a stalemate. And so then we were like, okay, let's have a conversation with Anne and see what she says, and whichever direction she goes, we swing that way. And Anne just went, do you think the film's over? And that's when Rintu's heart broke into a million pieces because she knew that the film wasn't.
Yeah, somewhere I knew it wasn't, because when you go deep, you're trying to also make connections for it to work as a story. And there were some parts of it that were just not sitting well. And at that point, that was like a 2.5-hour rough cut, I think. And we had to dismantle it completely and start afresh. And that's when the pandemic happened. It was very, very hard because the festival started, you're always, not always, but you're sort of like thinking also about an audience while finishing a film. And at that one point, I think it was very, very challenging to cut out the noise and to go back into this film and then say, is this the story that I set out to make? And when I asked myself that and I saw that cut and I knew, no, the soul was missing. And then we started it again. And that's why that took such a long time. But once that was done, and even though deadlines were passing and festival submissions were not happening, but when that happened, we were just like, this is done. We don't care if a festival doesn't take it, but this is a story we would love to share with the world. So to arrive at that space of confidence, especially because this was our first feature. So we've been used to, shots, and shots of about 20 minutes. It's a completely different beast when it crosses the 30-minute mark. So I think that's where.
I can only imagine the amount of footage that you had. Coming back to the amazing women, before I ask, I just got the sign that we have 10 more minutes left. So the last chance to take okay, my cameraman is laughing at me. Okay, I'm sorry. There is the microphone. If you have a question, there is like the last few minutes to ask a question. Yes, please, take the chance. We would love to hear it.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to ask whether your work as filmmakers was affected by the journalists, because you're both reporting on issues, but the way of reporting and the quantity of material you're putting out is very different. And then also I had the feeling that the journalists were facing a lot of struggles in their personal fields. And I was wondering if that transferred in any way to your lives or how your work was affected while making the film. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. Do you want to take it?
That's an interesting question. So I think what essentially happened was when we started filming them in 2016, they just shifted to the form of video, and they were discovering the politics of what it means being in front and being behind a camera. And there's always a power dynamic. I mean, it's always a tilted equation. Like the filmmaker's always in a higher position, right, on a higher ground. And the other thing that happened was that while they were in the pursuit of facts and objectivity and truth, our exploration was not really a pursuit of truth, so to speak. We were filming their lives, and for us, truth was an abstraction. We were looking for different things. And so all of these conversations were happening internally, but we also had these conversations with them. Consent, when you're a print journalist, is very different from consent when you're a video journalist. And there were these string of interesting conversations that we had in the first year where we were filming them. And, it was interesting because you had these journalists filming their protagonists, and that was a reality right there, while our lens was pointed on a very specific aspect of what is, a very specific part of their reality, which was our reality. And, I can keep making this more complex, but we were constantly bouncing off these ideas of whose truth is the higher truth and so on and so forth. There were many times where we were tempted to intervene, especially in the first year, where they were trying to figure out technology. You just need to hit the send button, Shyamkali, to have this WhatsApp message go to Meera. But, she would spend half a day figuring out WhatsApp, and we would be filming. And Karan, me, and Rintu would be like, we need to tell her, because this is sadistic. You can't, you're like, no, you're filmmakers. You can't sort of dilute the truth that they are living right now. So it was complicated in that sense. But yeah, I mean, we also did like a couple of workshops for them, completely divorced from the aspect of making films. We did a workshop on how do you make your social media content interesting? How do you think of news as storytelling? And it was great fun. But we were very conscious of not interfering in their process of journalism. Our approach essentially was we needed to shadow their process, and we needed to essentially melt in and blend in to their lives, because our purpose or our objective as storytellers was to give you an experience of what it means being a Meera in Uttar Pradesh. So, and Meera's also short. She's a feisty woman, but she's short. So, and Karan and I are like fairly tall. So how do you film from her point of view? So the camera is always at her level. What does Uttar Pradesh look like from her level? And how do you push the film more into the space of an observation of their life? It's almost a meditation. So yeah, these were debates that we were constantly having.
I have a follow-up question before we go into the second part of the question and before we have to end, I think, is when you were in the final editing process, and I mean they are experienced journalists, did they give you feedback on how you should or how they are expecting the story to go? Was there like, I mean, you say it was hard for you to keep like behind the lines, but how was it vice versa?
I think that's where they absolutely trust us, and I find that to be such a privilege to receive from protagonists, because there was absolutely no interaction with what the story is. They had no idea what the story was till they watched the film. And that was very important for us. They never intervened in, can you show us the shot? What are you going to film today? There was absolutely no questioning. So we'd keep in touch and say what's happening, just generally understanding what's going on in their lives and what kind of stories that they're doing. We'd give them a heads up, land up, shoot, but never, were we asked about what the angle would be. And it was very important that space is very sanctimonious. That we're making the film that we set out to make, and there's absolutely no intervention. The only time we reached out was when we wanted footage that was theirs to integrate into the film. And even then, they never asked, what are you going to do with it? So that kind of trust in us is very, very special. So
that's also very beautiful.
Actually, I'll sort of correct myself. Our world premiere happened in a hut in Uttar Pradesh 7 days before Sundance, where we took a small projector and a piece of cloth and put it up on the wall. And we were batshit nervous about how the journalists were going to respond to the film, because they were going to watch the film for the first time. And this was 5 years of filming, 5 years of your life that's going to play out in front of you. And it's an intimate story, right? And so they were there, and we were watching the film, and we knew we were hitting the right notes because they were giggling and laughing at certain moments, and there was this deep silence at others. And when the credits ended, there was this strangely awkward silence, and we were just like, oh, they're going to ask us to edit things out. And then they started clapping, and there were hugs, and there were tears in the room. And we were like, you like the film? And they were like, we love the film because this is our story and it's 5 years of our lives. And a couple of the journalists are no more. So like just seeing them on screen. And, as journalists, we never document our process. And you caught us at a time where we were transitioning, and it was emotional for us because we'd been a newspaper for 14 years and there was a lot of resistance internally to shift to digital. But you've captured that slice of our own journey, and in a sense also captured a moment in this transition that's also happened in India. And it speaks about what we truly believe in. When they said that, that's when we were like, it couldn't be better. So yeah, so they were they were all on board with the film.
That's nearly wonderful last words, but there was a second part of the question. And I think that's a really beautiful ending. How are the girls today? How are they doing? Are they fine? Are they working? Are they, you mentioned a bit of it in our conversation, but as I understood, that was like the second part.
COVID has been one of their busiest times. They transitioned to this new workflow very quickly because also that is their usual workflow. It's very decentralized. Everyone's doing their own thing, and then there's a control center, everything goes there. So in terms of reporting, they got hit. But I think after the lockdown, we went into one of the most severe lockdowns in the world. Once that opened up, you saw everybody masked up. You saw, news appearing, and we were all in touch. The great thing that happened was collaborations, because people couldn't travel to Uttar Pradesh anymore. So they needed people on ground. So there was a lot of interesting new type of work, a lot of collaborative projects on women's health, on domestic violence that was on an all-time rise everywhere in the world, and definitely there. And they worked really as they've always been questioning the lack of access that marginalized communities have had to resources. And COVID was a time